Yes, so the next question, the next
Presenter is Akshay Anchan. He's a
yeah.
student of Dr. Vintapuri from KM Mumbai.
Okay,
Dr.
okay.
Anchan,
Yes.
is a case is the hemifacial microsomia, sir.
Okay, okay, okay.
Uh, and am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
Anchan.
you are.
Yeah. Good evening, respected faculty members and all dear leads. I am Dr. Akshay Anchan, final resident MCS Plastic Surgery. I'll be presenting a short case on craniofacial microsomia. My guide is Dr. Vinita Puri Madam, Professor and Head Department of Plastic Surgery, GSMC and KM Hospital, Mumbai. And my plastic first PG mentor is Dr. Lakshmi Pallupuri Madam, Professor, Osmania Medical College, Hyderabad. I'm presenting a case of a 19-year-old female resident of Calicut who came with complaints of asymmetry of the face since birth and also complaint of poorly formed left ear since birth. However, there was no history of difficulty in breathing, mouth opening, feeding, and hearing at birth. Also, the developmental milestones were attained at appropriate age intervals. She was born out of a non-consanguineous marriage. There is no other significant antenatal history. There is associated past history of undergoing surgery for a poorly formed left ear around 1 year back. The reconstruction was attempted using rib cartilage graft, which was done in a staged manner. Also, she gives history of being treated by an orthodontic surgeon for alignment of teeth. There is no history of similar complaints in the siblings or other family members. A general examination, the patient is conscious, cooperative, well-oriented with time, place, and person. She is averagely built and nourished. Rest of the general examination findings are normal and vitals are stable. Fine examination was normal. A local examination. I have examined the patient in the sitting position from all sides, from the front, from the lateral view, and from the top. I have seen for the facial symmetry, which is seen to be asymmetrical. The left side of the face is hypoplastic, particularly in the middle third.
Change the slide, Anchan. Change the slide.
Yes, ma'am. Left half of the face is hypoplastic, particularly in the middle third and the lower third. Both orbit appear symmetrical. Left maxilla and zygoma are hypoplastic. There is evidence of a reconstructed left auricle, which is in C2, with a scar of previous surgery, which is noted. The left commissure of the lip is tilted upwards. Angle of the left side mandible is slightly at a higher level. The left side mandible appears hypoplastic. Chin is retruded and deviated to the left side. The distance from the lateral canthus of the eye to the tragus is more on the right than on the left side, as well as the angle of mouth to tragus distance is more on the right than on the left side. There is a upward occlusal cant on the left side, which is noted. Also, there is a class 2 malocclusion with anterior open bite. Dental braces are seen in C2 in both upper and lower dentoalveolar arch, and there is good oral. Mouth opening is normal. Chin is deviated to the left side on mouth opening. There is no evidence of cleft of the palate or hypoplastic tongue. Cranial nerve examination was normal. I have also looked for other anomalies such as epibulbar dermoids, colobomas, preauricular pits, macrosomia, vertebral anomalies, and limb anomalies. I would like to palpate the skeleton, especially the mandibular condyle on the left side, and perceive its movement and compare it with the opposite normal side. Also, I would like to measure the height of the ramus and compare it on both the sides, as well as the distance on the angle to the symphysis. I would like to compare. Also, I would like to palpate the infraorbital rim, maxilla, zygoma, mastoid, frontal, and the temporal one and compare with the opposite normal side. I would like to assess the function of the muscles of mastication. I would also like to palpate both superficial temporal and tree. On systemic examination, was within the normal limit. My diagnosis is a left-sided. My diagnosis is a left-sided non-syndromic craniofacial microsomia, classified according to the SAT classification as S2, that is condyle ramus and sigmoid notch identifiable but grossly distorted, or S3, that is poorly identifiable ramable component to complete agenesis of ramus. A3, that is malformed lobule with rest of pinna absent, that was at birth, and T1, that is minor contour, soft tissue contour deformity with no cranial nerve involved. The following problems are to be addressed. Mainly three. That is the management of the skeletal component, soft tissue component, and the functional problem. Coming to the skeletal component, I would like to correct the left upward occlusal cant and also correct the retruded chin. In the soft tissue component, I would like to correct the motor deformity of the left malar remnants. And the functional problem, I like to achieve alignment of the dentoalveolar arch of both maxilla and mandible in the midline and also with the mid sagittal plane. So should I proceed?
Yeah, keep on going. I'll ask you questions then later on. Okay.
My treatment plan would progress with initially with investigations to confirm the diagnosis and for surgical planning. I would do a non-contrast CT phase with 3D reconstruction. In the images seen in the picture, I can the CT images which are showing the and maxilla of the left side, as well as there's a left upward occlusal cant. Also, the angle of the left mandible is at a higher level than as compared to the right side. The opposite right side ramus appears normal. Right side ramus, also the coronoid and the condyle and sigmoid notch appears normal, and the body of mandible is normal. The left affected side shows vertical shortening of the ramus and also hypoplasia of the condyle, the coronoid process, as well as obliteration of the sigmoid notch. Also, the posterior half of the body of mandible is slightly shortened. Also, the zygoma is hypoplastic. And yes, I would like to proceed with cephalometric analysis, basically to plan surgery to see how the skeletal movements will happen in order to ensure optimum occlusion and aesthetic outcomes. Also, I would like to, it will help me in planning pre-op models so that I can plan a model surgery before delving into the final surgery on table. Also, I would like to involve the orthodontic colleagues in the process of doing cephalometry and for the construction of the occlusal splints, which might be required in the post-op period also.
Okay.
I would like to go have a dental consult and evaluation and creation of dentals. I also want to do CD chest to see for the donor ribs. Since previously the patient has been operated for a stage reconstruction, so just to check for the donor side which is available, you have to harvest a rib cartilage or other investigations such as X-ray cervical spine. I would like to do to see for to rule out any vertebral anomalies. To do an ultrasonography of the abdomen to rule out if there is any genital anomalies. Also, a 2D echo to rule out any cardiac anomalies, and an audiometry to assess the hearing of the patient and rule out any abnormalities. Further, I would like to proceed with investigations for pre-anesthetic checkup, basic blood investigation, chest X-ray, ECG, and also evaluation of airway from the anesthesia point of view.
Okay.
My management would be in stages. In my first stage, I would proceed with vertical lengthening of the left ramus of mandible using an internal or semi-buried mandibular distraction device. The vector of this device would be in the vertical direction, which will help in correction of the vertical shortening of the ramus. In this procedure, I will do it by an intraoral approach. Pre-op, I will use the cephalometry and models to understand the site of the osteotomy which will be required for this distraction device to be inserted. And accordingly, I will plan the osteotomy site on the lateral surface of the ramus. I'll do a corticotomy, and then I will place the distraction device and on both proximally and distally, and bring out and fix it with screws by a transbuccal trocar. And the distal end will be brought out from just below the angle of the mouth, just below the angle of the mandible, which is visible inferiorly in the picture. And I will start with distraction. Initially, I would wait for the latent period of around 5 to 7 days, and after that, I will start distraction about 1 millimeter per day. And objectively, I will see for signs of improvement in the occlusal cant and the left side, whether it is coming horizontal, and also I would see for the angle of the mandible of the affected side, whether it is coming symmetrical as compared to the opposite side. I will also do a follow-up lateral cephalogram to see for the improvement in the findings of with mandibular distraction, and subsequently I will stop the distraction, and I will keep the distractor in situ, and proceed. The next phase is the consolidation phase, that is for around 2 months, and after that I will remove the distractor. In the second surgery, it will require second surgery because it's placed internally, and that will help me achieve my vertical lengthening of the ramus. However, in this procedure, I am anticipating that since there is also a mild vertical shortening of the affected maxilla left side, there could be an possibility of posterior open bite which the patient can develop on the left, as well as a lateral crossbite on the opposite side. So in order to tackle that, I would use occlusal splints along with the distractor, so as to keep the distraction consolidated during the procedure or during the process of the distraction, and it should not relapse. This is my in stage 1. I have also planned an alternate plan, considering there is a slight vertical insufficiency maxilla. So I would do a combined maxillomandibular distraction with a Leeford 1 corticotomy made simultaneously with a mandibular osteotomy, and with the treatment of distraction device, and I would give an intermaxillary fixation. So I would like to
what is this known as? What is this procedure known as? Where you are combining the mandibular distraction along with the maxillary distraction. What do you call it?
Two jaw surgery.
No. This is one surgeon has described this. It is after his name. Molina's technique. This is known as Molina's technique.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. This is Molina's technique, in which you distract both maxilla as well as the mandible, so that the occlusion can be set in one go.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. With this, in this approach, I'll achieve both the things: vertical lengthening of the ramus, as well as the maxillary length will also be appropriate as compared to opposite side. And subsequently, I will after the process of distraction is over, I will remove the distractor, and then I will plan for the second stage, that is for the multiplane osseous genoplasty, as patient has chin mandible. For that, I will do a multiplane osseous genoplasty, and subsequently, once tissue equilibrium is attained, and the third stage, I would plan for correcting the soft tissue contour deformity on the left side. I have showed an example. This is not the patient's case. It is a serial autofat grafting or use of composite deepithelialized dermis pad facial flap for mild soft tissue contour. I would not use a muscle flap because there is chances that the muscle could atrophy with use. So I would prefer to use a fat or a deepithelialized dermis pad or facial flap for this. Also, other option is to do a serial autofat grafting, which can also be done in multiple settings and can be assessed after each fitting. My options for the adipofacial, for if I want to do a deepithelialized dermis pad and facial flap, would be a adipofacial flap such as anterior flap, scapular flap, parascapular flap, and groin flap. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think your presentation was, for me, it was quite good. Hardly left any place for me to ask you questions. Very good presentation. So I can't ask you much. Only comment is that, instead of doing so many big flaps for soft tissue augmentation, the choice of auto-fat grafting in stages is probably the probably most viable and acceptable option to me. Rest of the things, I would agree with your plan.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned, your presentation was almost flawless. I can't find any lacunae in your presentation. It was absolutely good.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Somebody else, Dr.
Yeah,
Sandeep or Dr. Lakshmi will like to ask. Dr. Anchal has presented, very well.
Dr. Anchal, so you are actually talking about autofat grafting and de-epithelialized dermis and all. No? What, in your opinion, would be lasting the most? Is it a de-epithelialized dermis, or is it the fat, or is it just fat injection? So what is the thing that would actually last the longest?
So the longest and most would be the de-epithelialized flaps, dermis fat and tissue flaps. Would last for the longest. Whereas the auto-fat grafting, there is chances that the fat could get absorbed, and hence again repeated settings will be required. Of course, if we do an auto-fat grafting with incorporation of certain factors like platelet-rich plasma, so help in enhancing the quality of the fat, which can be incorporated into the defects, and which can help in enhancing the viability of the fat.
Yeah, very good. So the one problem with putting a dermafat graft is, because of the gravity, this fat, the dermafat tends to actually gradually come down. So is there some way that this can be prevented? How do you do that?
We can fix it with some bony landmark, periosteum of zygoma. We can stitch it with the periosteum of zygoma, so with a long-acting suture material, which can help in keeping it in that position. Or we could use an observable, non-observable material such as proline suture, which can keep it hitched up to the zygoma.
Yeah, it's actually more difficult to do than to actually talk about it, but it's actually pretty difficult to do that. Yeah. Then suppose that amount of, so you don't want to actually go in and do big osteotomies and do the distractions, etc. No? The patient is not willing for that, or for some reason you don't want to do that. But at the same time, the volume of fat that is required is actually very high. So is there some way that you can actually augment the, increase the amount of fat that you're able to keep there?
So we can use split rib grafts also along with the fat grafting, so that will enhance the volume and improve the contour of that side.
Yeah, that is one way. But let's say this on the cheek. If you want to actually increase the volume of the cheek, so you can put a rib graft up, because of the angle, the mandible, all those things. You can actually put the costal cartilages over there, or the split rib you can keep. But what about the cheek? You want to put a lot of volume. You want a much bigger amount of fat to take, because there's a limitation of the thickness which derma fat will take. So is there some way to actually increase the take? Or is there some way you can put in more fat, more derma fat or other fat material that you want to put there?
We can do a tissue expansion prior the size of the cavity.
a simple way Akshay, would be actually to take the superficial temporalis facial flap, and then you flip it over, and so one layer would be below the temporalis fascia and that facial flap, and then on both the sides you can keep your derma fat. So the total volume of the fat that you're going to put there would be double.
Okay.
Because there is a very vascular superficial temporal artery flap in between these two layers of derma fat.
That is actually mainly to increase the vascularity of the fat also.
Correct.
When
Correct.
you put the fat, no, as such. Anshan, you able to get it?
Yes, sir. I understood.
Yeah. So the vascularity of the fat, which is there also, because the fat absorption is quite unpredictable. So that is why we sandwich it, kind of thing. Okay. Yeah.
So in the immediate post-operative period, do you do anything to actually retain the fat in position?
I would avoid any pressure on that side, affected side, and also mild cold compresses without pressing too much, which will help in increasing the viability of the fat.
Do you put
and also ask the patient to avoid sleeping on that side.
Do you fix the fat externally with some bolster dressings or something? Bolsters? You can
No, sir, we just
actually you can fix it externally also using fixation bolsters to the skin all around wherever you want to put the fat. You can do that also. And sometimes in the post-operative period, if it's very large thing, we don't want it to move. No? So we actually put a Ryle's tube and then we ask them to take liquid diet for 5 days to a week. So that again, the movement, the take is much better if you avoid movement over there. So avoid unnecessary speech, etc. also can be advised for these patients.
yes, sir.
I think that's all, sir, from my part. Anything else, sir?
Sir,
Madam?
sir,
Dr. Lakshmi.
give some guidelines for orthognathic surgery and these distractors, sir.
Okay,
Where to put,
we
go
must-
for which procedure?
yeah. What happens is that when you want the movement in the maxilla or the mandible, which is about more than 4 millimeters or so, then we should always go in for distraction, because if you have skeletal movement more than 4 millimeter and you try to do it with the one stage orthognathic surgery, the soft tissue envelope does not allow that much movement. Secondly,
Okay.
there will be, it's so difficult to maintain it. One way of still doing it by orthognathic surgery will be that you resort to bimaxillary surgery. That in one you advance, in other you can recess, so that it becomes almost double. But still, you can do correction for up to about, say, 1 centimeter long. That is the extreme limit in orthognathic surgery. Whereas in distraction osteogenesis, it is not only distraction osteogenesis, there is also happening distraction histogenesis. So the soft tissue is also increasing in volume. So it accommodates better. So whenever you want large movements of the tissue, it is always better to do distraction. But when you have a limited amount of movement required in the skeletal components, then orthognathic surgery is the procedure of choice. Distraction has its own problems because it may not be very stable. So a lot of methods have been devised to keep that distracted segment, in that position. One is that after distraction, you put plates there or put bone graft there after that, so it stays put. But the main advantage of distraction is that it allows the soft tissue envelope also to increase proportionately. So the chances of relapse are less. So I think these are the broad outlines.
Okay. Okay. Thank
So
you, sir.
can we take 2 or 3 questions people have put in the chat box?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Gaurav has asked a question. En bloc bimaxillary distraction. So, sir, for 3 months there will be feeding issues as there is an IMF. He's asking a question whether there will be a feeding issues because of the IMF.
Yeah, actually, share the concern, but the issue is that after some time you can replace this with elastics. The IMF can be replaced with elastics, and the patients can continue to have their feeds. You need not resort to the absolute fixation with wires. So the elastics can be used, and it can be there.
Yes.
The patients are able to comply with that. Feeding should not be a problem.
Yes. Dr. Joseph Carter is asked another question. Would a BSSO be required after lengthening of ramus?
It could very unlikely that you will require BSSO. Maybe after you have lengthened the mandible, have to do something to the maxilla to match that occlusion. So that is why what Dr. Anchal had described, that Molina's technique, that as you are distracting the mandible, you could also give a cut in the maxilla, so that when the distraction is taking place, it is automatically adjusting the relations of the maxilla also. So if you do that, probably BSSO will not be needed. But you cannot rule out. In some situations, you might have to do that also. And bilateral sagittal split osteotomy is a very versatile operation. It can, correct a lot of deformities. It could be a good option in some cases.
Dr. Selvan has asked a question: how to calculate the volume of fat required to augment? Any volumetric methods are available?
Well, I think Dr. Sandeep will be able to answer it better. I don't know
I
don't know much about it.
Yeah, what we do is we actually make a facial mollage initially, and then we do a wax buildup. And once the wax buildup is done to get a good symmetry, then we know the exact volume. Many times we sterilize that wax buildup also and keep it in the operating room, so that we'll know exactly the shape with the thickness that is required, etc. And that is a simple way of actually doing a derma fat grafting.
Sandeep?
Yeah.
Sandeep, can I answer this question?
Yeah, sure.
There are
Dr. Radha.
There are certain softwares available now which has come into vogue, wherein we can assess the fat amount of fat required, fat estimation, and we are also working with the radiology group to assess it by ultrasonographically as well as CT wise. There are certain softwares available right now, wherein we can use that.
Okay.
You can even see
I know.
Yeah, you can see even the fat which we have put. You can see the fate of the fat also. What has happened, how much of fat has been retained, all those things can be found out by MRI, sorry, not CT, MRI pictures. And along with some people, they do high resolution ultrasound also nowadays. They are trying to do that.
One common sense thing is that, whatever you do, you must always slightly overcorrect it, because fat will definitely get absorbed, whatsoever you might have done. So you don't have to be
likely to get it.
Yeah, you don't have to be absolutely purist that you calculate that much amount and that much has to be given. I think always overcorrection is always probably you must err on the side of doing little more than being little less.
Yes, sir. So I think we are actually we have finished both the short cases, and now we will go for the ward rounds.